RADAR-CNS is an international consortium, and it's a public-private consortium. And we brought together this group because we wanted to explore how data, which we're all generating all the time from our smartphones and wearable devices like a Fitbit or other similar sorts of devices, can actually help us understand the fluctuations which happen in health.
We chose three conditions: major depression, epilepsy, and multiple sclerosis. Making a difference in these diseases and showing that digital technologies can be promising is a lot of work. There was even a question whether patients will be willing to participate in a regime like this. There was many unanswered questions, and we had to form a program that tackled all aspects of what we were trying to do.
So for each of the disorders, we were looking to do three big things. Firstly, we wanted to see, could you actually collect data in this way? Secondly, we were interested in, did this data actually tell you something about the person's state, their illness at a state in time? And thirdly, could you predict a change?
What we have shown in MS and major depression and epilepsy is that we can collect data long-term from patients in the real world in a way that's analyzable and useful. This was not a given when we started these studies.
It's been an incredible journey, and yeah, 6 years is a long time to do any project. This has been quite a complex one with various different stages. So we started off dedicating a huge amount of time to designing the right kind of study, designing a study that patients would find acceptable and want to engage with for long periods of time, and making sure that the devices and the apps that we were intending to use were fit for purpose, measured what we wanted to be measuring. We did a long period of data collection. Our first participants were enrolled in November 2017, and we finished our data collection in March 2021. So in the last year, we've now moved on to our data analysis phase, where we've collected all the data we're going to have, and we're now cleaning it, processing it, and preparing to analyse it for our main research questions. And we've got some really exciting results. We've been able to show that it's feasible to recruit people into these kinds of studies, even those who are severely depressed. And we've collected a huge amount of qualitative information from interviewing our participants to help us understand what we could have done better and what we could do better next time round, because this is just the beginning of this research field, I think. We've published some studies linking the data that we've been collecting via the devices with depression outcomes, with functional status, with a whole load of outcomes that are important to the patient group and important to clinicians as well. And we're now moving on to sort of predictive analyses. So can we potentially tell someone in advance when they are at risk of having a relapse, so that they have the opportunity to prevent it or seek help in time to get extra support.
Struggles with sort of mental health or particularly sort of depression has been something that I've had sort of since I was sort of 13 or 14, and that's been something that, yeah, sort of, you know, for over half my life now, sort of, you know, lived with. So if this is able to sort of, you know, spot and say, look, your sleep's a bit down, you're not walking as much, you haven't been calling people as much, that's possibly a sign that you are withdrawing, you know, you're not doing as much, you haven't got as much energy. It's that sort of self-management, and it's kind of like a sort of way of spotting the signs, because we don't always put those together.
Multiple sclerosis is a very complex disease. In order to monitor the disease evolution and also to try to predict the trajectory of the disease, we need to take into consideration all these different variables. We thought that it was very fundamental at that time, 5 years ago, to try to find markers that are able to reveal in anticipation one attack or a bad evolution of the disease. This was the idea. And now we have another possibility, which can be a very important step in the understanding the disease and in treating the disease. That is, because of the granularity of the information we have with a wearable device, the possibility to pick up and to detect the changes that are taking place slowly, more or less slowly in the patient, and that can be classified as silent progression. It is a revolution because this type of damage is driven by completely different pathophysiological mechanisms than the attacks, and also it responds to other type of treatments. So it can really help to take very important treatment decisions in the future.
I think where its role really lies is that things which are done in the clinic can be done from home. Well, I can't walk unaided. I'm not allowed to drive. Using a wearable device is just so much easier. I can use it at home and I can be assessed 24/7 from home, and they can see how much you're standing up, how far you can walk, did you fall over, which in a clinical environment you've got maybe an hour, if you're lucky, every 6 months. You know, I think it speaks for itself.
Epilepsy is one of the most common neurological disorders, and it affects more than 70 million people worldwide. So it's very difficult for a patient to keep track of all the information, of the seizures in a seizure diary, for example. And it's difficult for clinicians to judge, for example, if after starting a therapy, the patient has improved in terms of seizure frequency or not. And so wearable devices can provide a more accurate way to objectively identify seizure frequency before, for example, starting a treatment and after starting a treatment, and help us evaluating the benefit on a specific individual.
It would be great just for that information to be sent to your neurologist so they can see it ahead and just give them a better idea of is medication working, or from emotions or stress, to have that information in front of them.
So I think that one of the most important findings of RADAR-Epilepsy has been reflected by a paper that was published and that also got an important award, and is related to the possibility of wearable devices to identify seizures at higher risk of SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. So we managed to develop an algorithm that was able to identify some SUDEP biomarkers, and in particular postictal immobility. So this is very important because using wearables we may identify postictal states that are at higher risk of lethality, and the devices can be applied into future research aiming at reducing the risk of SUDEP.
Our work package was about developing the radar-based platform. And the key challenges for radar-based was to be able to take data that was being thrown at the platform at sort of enormous velocity. So we have devices that are kind of sampling 30 times a second, generating a large amount of data, and being able to kind of hoover all of that data up and manage that at the scale of 1,500 people was pretty challenging. What we've tried to do is organize the data in a sort of structured way. So someone collecting data from one wearable device, it gets structured the same way from the next project that does the same thing. So there's sort of a harmonization sort of built into this, and that's very useful for people sort of doing data analysis, because you can write a tool or an analysis pipeline, and then you can reuse that pipeline very easily.
I've been working on speech and machine learning in the project. What we're doing is, in machine learning, we're looking for very, very fine patterns, very subtle differences in data, differences that we as humans can't see and can't realize, but a machine can find these. So we've got some initial results coming out of the speech research showing that we can predict someone's, if it has a low or a high depression status, just using speech samples at an accuracy of 80%. We've done that using some sort of state-of-the-art deep learning, which has been really exciting.
So we have learned quite a few things about how to also derive insights from the data. We are continuing to analyze these data in various ways and develop many novel algorithms. I think another major finding that we have is that it's much more important to have long-term longitudinal data from a given individual than to have small amounts of sparse data from a large number of individuals.
Our work package was the work package on clinical harmonization, and we were basically trying to be the glue between the three clinical work packages on the one hand, and on the other hand the technical work packages working on the platform development. 6 years ago I would never have dreamed that we would be here today, both in the enormous amount of data we collected, but also in terms of the platform, all the different features that we can extract and how they actually are used in those different disorders to get really meaningful information on what happens to people's daily life and how that translates to changes in their disorder. I think that has been an amazing achievement.
I work in RADAR-CNS Work Package 9, and our work focuses on looking at how the radar remote measurement technology system could be applied in practice in each of the clinical areas. In epilepsy, a person with epilepsy may wear a wearable device which could send an alert to their informal carer and to the patient themselves at the time of a seizure or just before a seizure. You reduce the risk of injury, so it could be really quite radically beneficial to have this kind of device.
This kind of data collection has huge potential for research methods. A huge amount of guesswork goes into understanding how someone has changed since the last time you saw them. So having this glimpse into the time frame in between your assessments is invaluable for researchers, invaluable for clinicians, in a way that is really much more acceptable to participants than having to do lengthy questionnaires again and again. So in a research context, the way we measure things it's going to drastically change how we do that. From a clinical perspective, allowing people to self-manage, giving people more information about themselves, combining this complex sensor data into a personalized picture. And imagine if a patient turned up in front of you, armed with all of this information about themselves. You can see in real time the impact that your therapy is having on their cognitions, on their behaviours, on the exact things that you are trying to target. So the opportunity to really tailor the support that we can provide our patients, I think, is immense.
The other side of it, I think, is also seeing some of the people develop, because we've actually developed people whose careers have been established in radar and have actually then gone on to really kickstart an academic career in research or move into industry.
As we move up this pyramid, there's increasing levels of patient and public involvement.
We've also seen a patient advisory board which has been incredibly interactive, and unusually for projects like this, we have quite a lot of our patient advisors as authors on publications, which I think is a really healthy part of the process, and I think indicates our commitment to that work.
We have learned that it really requires a very multidisciplinary team to make progress in this field, and I personally don't think that we would have been able to do a program like RADAR-CNS in absence of that. At a high level, you need clinicians, you need patients, you need technologists to make this happen.
RADAR, in a way, is a discovery project. It's allowed us to discover how to do these studies. It's allowed us to discover, to build a massive resource in terms of the open source platform to make it happen. And it's allowed us to generate a vast amount of data. So that has laid a foundation for a whole community of researchers. I can't predict, I'm optimistic, but I can't predict exactly where the field will go and which results from RADAR will make a real difference in terms of patient care. But I think actually laying those foundations has been incredibly important for a wider community of researchers.